What does it mean to be recession-proof? And more specifically, what can our churches do to thrive when the times get tough? Let's talk about it. Now, things get really stressful for everybody when the economy starts to tank, right? Yeah. No matter who you are or what your organization is, whether it's a church or any other business, everyone starts to get really, really stressed out.
Things get expensive. We feel the crunch. We don't want to spend money.
Yeah. Prices go up, income goes down, and we have to make a lot of really tough choices about what bills to cut and what things to remove from our life just to make sure that we can continue to thrive and survive during those times. So a lot of businesses have put a lot of thought into becoming what's called recession proof. In other words, shielding their organization from the effects of a recession so they can continue to survive through those tough times, right?
I like that visual, like shielding, keeping ourselves from those arrows of the toughness.
So we have to talk about, off the top, we have to talk about what it means to be recession proof. Just offer just a basic definition so that we're all on the same page, right? To be recession proof means that our business or our industry or any entity at all is resilient to the effects of a recession. Now that kind of seems a little bit circular, like the definition is, like it doesn't really explain much. Yeah. So let's actually give some examples of recession-proof industries or businesses, just so that we can get an idea of what we're talking about. So examples of recession-proof industries, these are things that, especially during the pandemic, which we just came out of, and during the recession that happened because of that, we saw the food industry doing really well. They had to make some changes, they had to pivot and restructure some things, but the food industry did well. And why is that?
People got to eat. Man.
People got to eat. Doesn't matter how bad the economy is going, we still have to eat 3 square meals a day. So a lot of businesses and a lot of grocery stores simply had to restructure some things. Like instead of having their customers walk through the aisles, they took online orders and their employees gathered everything up and brought it outside for the people to pick up.
Yeah.
Also, the healthcare industry, because people still get sick, people still get hurt, so they still need doctors, they still need medicine. So the healthcare industry did just fine during the pandemic. Also, real estate can be a little bit weird because like property prices can drop, but also that's when a lot of people start to buy. So if you're smart, if you're a real estate agent and you're smart and you can kind of plan for this, you know how exactly to survive during that time.
Yeah.
And also like discount retailers, a lot of people are looking for cheaper ways to get the things that they need.
I'm always looking for cheap ways to get things.
Yeah, good times and bad. And also the home improvement industry. A lot of contractors, like individual contractors or companies, did struggle, but the DIY, do-it-yourself, like that thrived. I know I redid my kitchen during the pandemic, so I definitely helped the home improvement industry survive.
And obviously you're talking about the pandemic because that was just so recent to us and everything, but even just looking back in the last recession that we had, the Great Recession, those were still industries that rocked it pretty well.
Yeah. Now let's also talk about recession-sensitive industries or organizations, because just to kind of have that contrast so that we, again, round out our understanding of what it means to be recession-proof. Construction struggled a lot.
Yeah.
I actually was working in construction during the pandemic. Right when it started, I was just getting started helping build a car dealership. And we did okay. Like the company I was working for still maintained all of its contracts and was able to keep everybody employed and running. But everybody in the industry got real nervous because when the owners of these buildings, their income tanks, they stop paying the general contractors.
Yep.
And all those building projects get put on hold. That's typically what happens in the construction industry. Also retail, the discount retail does great.
Yeah.
But the normal retail struggles because a lot of people tend to treat that as a luxury to buy market rates or to pay market rates for the things that they want.
Things like, well, I wanted to buy a coffee machine, but I'm not going to go to Target and buy a coffee machine now because times are tough. You know?
Yeah.
So.
And also the tourism and travel industry, like no one's going anywhere. Even when there's not a lockdown, no one is going to the big expensive theme park, spending 3 nights at a hotel, eating out every night.
Yeah.
They're staying home. and putting a tent up in their backyard and pretending like they're camping. So what can churches learn from recession-proof businesses? Especially since we want to help churches continue to remain open and minister to their people and into their communities, no matter whether we're in good times or bad economic times. I've talked to a lot of church leaders about this and also just done some research from businesses in general, what they did to protect their organizations from an economic downturn. And the first thing that a lot of church leaders are learning from is to diversify your revenue stream.
Yeah.
So instead of, because like most churches, what's their number one source of income?
Tithes and offerings.
And when does tithe and offering come in?
It comes in, I mean, usually at the beginning of the month.
Well, not just the beginning.
For
well,
some people,
either the beginning of the month or just Sundays, right?
Yeah.
When people are physically in the
Yes.
building, they drop they drop the money or the check into the envelope and put that into the offertory, and that's it. So most churches are getting their income either Sundays, every Sunday, or like maybe some people have like some recurring online donation thing, and it's at a certain time of month, usually like the beginning or end of the month.
Yeah.
So that makes your organization very sensitive to a recession. And we saw that with this recent pandemic.
Yeah.
During the lockdowns, when no one was allowed to go to church, that meant that churches weren't getting their normal income because no one was in the building. A lot of churches did pivot, and this is actually, I'm cheering on churches right now. We did really well here. A lot of churches embraced online giving.
Yeah.
Churches had already done that. A lot of churches that hadn't done that yet jumped on board really fast to keep
which is a diversification of your income stream.
Exactly. That's another source of income. But we also have to think beyond that. I actually found a really cool story out of Detroit. There's a church called the Church of the Messiah in Detroit. It's an Episcopal church that the pastor was watching his congregation decline in numbers year over year, to the point where they were thinking about having to shut down the church.
Goodness.
And this is an old historic church, massive, gorgeous building. And to have the doors of that church shuttered would have been terrible for the community.
Yeah.
So he thought outside the box and launched an entrepreneurial school to help people in the community learn how to like launch a business and run the business.
Okay.
And also just teach them general like leadership principles. Because if you're a pastor, you're an expert in managing people and just leadership in general. So he helped people learn how to like start an LLC and how to file for their taxes.
I need to give him a shout.
Yeah, I know. And the benefit is that more people started coming, people started their businesses and were succeeding, and so they started donating back to the church. And also more people began coming to the church just to be a part of that school, but also join the church itself. The pastor networked with other business leaders to help like connect his students with those companies for jobs, and also other leadership training in general. So he connected his church as a hub to the wider community, and also helped the community that was poverty-stricken start to actually generate income and help survive and maintain the future of the church. So he's doing great. I actually have an article linked in the blog post, the How to Recession-Proof Your Church. So this is where I learned about it. The title is A Church-Run Business Incubator Grows Its Community's Own Solutions to Poverty.
That's cool.
Brilliant. A lot of churches would benefit from this kind of creative thinking and generating income for the church by utilizing or leveraging the talents and the resources that they already have.
And churches have a lot of resources. Because, I mean, just thinking at the top of my head, all right, churches, they have a big space that they use every Sunday morning.
Right.
That's for worship, but you could have a concert at your church, perhaps. So it's a concert venue. Maybe you can have like Christian bands come in and then they pay a certain amount to use that venue or whatever. Wedding venue, that's a big one. People are still going to get married in recession or any time for that matter. So using a church as a wedding venue and being able to charge, an amount for that's
even if it's a very low, very, very, very low and competitive rate, you're still generating income that you wouldn't have otherwise.
One thing my old church did is we had a market, and it was like a community market because there wasn't an arts market that was like right there in our community, so we made one.
Yeah.
And we actually made money on that.
Yeah, art and craft, farmer's market, flea market. If you have a community of small business owners or people who are very savvy with resale and flipping things, you can give them the space to sell what they have to offer. And you can even charge each vendor a small fee to have that space. And whether it be inside the building or out on the church grounds, like the parking lot, or if you have like a large field next to your church, you can utilize that space to generate that income. Another thing that I've seen a lot of churches do really well is building strong relationships, and this is twofold.
Okay.
First, you have to invest in your members. There's really no way around that. You have to pour into your members, and the reason why is because the entire world is turning itself upside down, and you need to offer some sort of stability that they can hold on to during those tough and stressful times.
Yeah.
Because, and again, they're your people, you're called to serve them, but also they're going to be what pulls your church through those tough times.
Yes.
Because the church is nothing without the people, right?
No.
And then also making connections with the community, like that pastor in Detroit connecting with the business leaders. Reach out to other organizations and businesses in your area to see what their needs are so that you can see how your church can serve them and they can help serve you as well and have those connections so that you become a vital part of your community. You're not just another building that people drive by and don't even think about on their way to work.
Yeah, and relationships with the community was so big for my last church I was a part of because we made it a point to know all the business owners, the small business owners in our community. And it was so cool to see like the flower shop next door. They would offer free flowers to our church.
Nice.
There was a bagel shop near us, and we would patron that place all the time and get to know them. And so at times whenever we were able to help, send people their way to bring them business, but they were also more than happy to send things our way as well. So
well, your church now does it really well.
Yes.
I actually went to a job fair at your church years ago.
Did you really?
Yeah, in the gym. They had a big venue. They had their gym open with a lot of different businesses in the local area that were hiring show up.
Okay.
And then the next day, they did like a resume building seminar in the coffee shop that I went to.
That's wild.
That was years ago, but they still have done stuff like that over the past few years, I've noticed. So your church has actually been doing the number one and number two together.
Yeah.
So they're using their space and offering it up as a source of income, but also maintaining those relationships with organizations and helping the community connect with those organizations and tying it all together.
Yeah.
And the church is that tie together.
That's awesome.
Number three, and this is what I see a lot of churches doing really well, is both looking to the past and embracing the future.
So what does that look like?
So what I mean by that is churches have to do both of these things. They have to look to the past to understand their connection with church history in general and orthodoxy and Christian teaching and what their role is in their community and the longevity that they've had. Like if you're a church plant and you're new, you can't necessarily hold on to like the history of your church, but you can hold on to the history of the church in general, like capital C church.
Yeah.
But a lot of churches, they've been around for decades. They've been in the community, they've been in that building for a very long time. And they can leverage the fact that they have that presence in the community to help and reach out to the larger community and serve them.
Okay.
But we also have to look to the future. We can't pine for the glory days of the church.
No, because then the church won't be around if you're just looking back at the past saying, remember when?
Exactly. But you can't just constantly chase the future. You can't be looking at the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Because the pitfall of looking at just one and not the other is that you overlook the fact that the ministry you have to do is right here and now.
Yeah.
You miss the ministry that God has called you to do right in front of you. So by holding both together, you pull them together into the present so that you can serve the church, reach the community in its immediate context, but also understand your place and your role in this larger narrative that Christ is writing throughout history.
Okay.
An example of this, and this is actually something you pointed out to me.
This is pretty neat.
Yeah.
I like this one. You have to show this.
So Barnes & Noble, the new CEO of Barnes & Noble, his name is James Daunt, and he was brought in just a few years ago, I think at the end of the last decade, I think 2017, 2018. And Barnes & Noble recently turned 100 years old.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
That's a long time to be selling books.
And they've started to struggle over the past decade and a half because of
Amazon.
Amazon.
Everybody buys books there now.
Now, the irony is Barnes & Noble put a lot of small bookstores out of business. So they were the Goliath against the David.
Yeah.
Now Barnes & Noble is struggling against...
Flip-flop.
Yeah, that's been flipped. Barnes & Noble is now the David trying to fight the Amazon Goliath. And James Daunt's solution is to look back to the origins of Barnes & Noble, which I didn't know this until you shared this with me.
And I didn't know it either until I came across it, and I was like, whoa, this is nuts.
Yeah, Barnes & Noble used to be an indie bookstore.
Yeah.
And they used to sell just indie books. They used to market to like the small authors and the people that were really interested in that kind of field.
Yeah.
They reached into that field and that space, and that's where they used to sit before they became the behemoth.
And they gradually just kept adopting more and more to where they were the #1 bookseller, I think, in the United States at one point.
Yeah, I mean, they were what the movie You've Got Mail with Tom Hanks was parodying.
Yeah.
Putting out the Meg Ryan's little bookstore.
That's right. They were.
What James has done is he has connected the company back to its roots by helping the individual stores, instead of like having to sell what the what headquarters tells them they need to sell, they allow the managers of each individual bookstore to determine what's in their space and what they sell. So they've actually turned everything back to treating them as if they are a small local bookstore rather than a network or a chain.
Which is really cool to see that, and then playing it in terms of how churches can do this. I mean, Barnes & Noble basically looked back and said, where did we come from?
Yeah.
And is this something that we can embrace? And churches being able to do the same thing to say, hey, we started because we saw this need in our community, and we haven't been fulfilling that need for however many years. Maybe we should get back to the roots of that.
Well, and there's two ways to do that, and I'm kind of jumping the gun. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but there's two things that churches have that are their roots, and that is the gospel and their own mission and vision statement. But we'll talk more about what that is and why that's important a little bit later. So stick around. Number 4, the thing that I have learned from a lot of church leaders and the businesses that I'm reading about and learning about is a lot of organizations that survive tough times have a long view of history and a long view of the future. So when things get bad very quickly, a lot of people panic and try to like pivot and make a lot of changes and sell off a lot of their excess. It's just so that they can survive and run lean for a while.
Yeah.
But a lot of organizations that survive the long term actually hold on to their assets, knowing that things will get better eventually, and they'll have everything they need on the other side of this tough time.
Yeah.
So my recommendation for churches is when things get really tough, you may have to make some changes. You may have to adjust some things just to make sure that you're able to survive. But continue to make long-term plans. Create like business plans for not just 3 to 6 months ahead of time, but even 1 or 3 or 5 years ahead of time. Because having that plan and having an expectation of the future can be that guiding force and that motivation to keep going when things get really hard and confusing. You're not really sure what to do next.
Yeah. Well, and I've seen this play out too with a church that was having a little bit of a struggle. They ended up selling off some of their land to a developer. And so that developer then built houses in that land right next to the church where they used to park cars and everything. And then as the church grew again, they didn't have enough space to park cars and stuff. And they would have had it if they would have just held tight, not quickly sold off everything, but actually thought about, hey, long term, let's try to make this happen.
Now, the last thing I'll share, and there's actually more than this. I wrote an article, the 9 lessons that churches can learn from recession-proof businesses. Definitely check out that article. I'll link to it in the description below. So if you want to learn even more than what we're sharing in this video, definitely check that out. But my favorite thing, and this is the lesson that I saw both businesses and some churches do really well, is to be innovative and adaptable. Now, that's very vague and broad.
Yeah, you got to unpack that, man.
What I mean is, like some restaurants, a lot of restaurants struggled during the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
And during the lockdowns, but some thrived. And that's because a lot of them turned into grocery stores.
Yeah.
So first of all, a lot of restaurants started selling the produce and the meat that was in their fridge and in the kitchen, just so that that wouldn't go to waste. And then they realized, oh, like people actually are willing to buy this stuff from us. Let's order some more and sell that again.
Well, it was so interesting, and this kind of hits home to me because my sister at the time was managing a restaurant during this, and because restaurants buy from their suppliers in bulk and everything, they're able to get prices in a way to where they were able to sell like a lot of staples that people typically bought in the grocery store. They were able to sell them at a great discount to people, but also make a lot of revenue from it and a lot of profit. And so it was kind of a win-win. People during that time were able to go somewhere very close to them that they could literally walk to, get the groceries they needed, and also save money. So it was a win-win for both people.
And some other examples were like commercial airlines, like passenger airlines became cargo airlines and basically became logistics companies. So they made some revenue by just having companies pay them, like Amazon because a lot of people started ordering more from Amazon. Even Amazon struggled to scale up to meet the needs and demands of everybody's online ordering. So a lot of just regular commercial airlines started hauling stuff for Amazon just to keep that revenue stream open. Gyms and fitness centers offered their classes online instead of in person, so people could still stay fit.
This was something I actually was a part of, because the gym I went to at the time, they couldn't open their doors and everything, so they did online classes, and I was like, well, sweet, I can do them online.
That way we could avoid gaining the COVID-19. And then taxi services became makeshift ambulance services. So they would pick up sick people, take them to the hospital when ambulances were overloaded. And then churches. This is an example I found in Time magazine. There's a lot of churches did this and similar things, but there's a church that they interviewed during the pandemic. They made a pivot to outdoor services in their parking lot. So to keep everybody spaced out and everyone safe, they had everyone just roll up into the parking lot and then roll down their windows, or maybe they had something over a speaker system that could play in the car. But they had just their regular service that way. And so they hosted service on site just differently. So they could continue to meet in person.
Which a lot of churches, when they saw that happening, they quickly saw, hey, this is something we can adapt and change, and they're able to make it. I mean,
a silly example, but probably my favorite, is like baptisms were done by squirt gun. That's a pivot, though. That's an adjustment to the needs and context that they were in at the time.
That's pretty funny. I didn't. That's a good one.
So if your church baptized by sprinkling, you could just
there's a drive-by baptism.
Drive-by baptisms, yes, literally. They had people just roll through the parking lot and just squirt gun. So these are some of the lessons that your church can learn as well. The key is to think outside the box and to generate extra income and extra revenue, and also become a hub for your community to connect your members with the surrounding community and the community with your church, so that you can be the tide that raises all boats, I think. And that's the best way to ensure that you keep your focus on the mission of the church. And that the real reason and the real way that you can recession-proof your church is to stay focused on the mission. And that is the gospel and your church's mission and vision statement. The mission and vision statement of your church is basically a reiteration of the gospel, but also what sets you apart from the rest of the churches in your area and makes you unique.
And that doesn't change no matter what the financial climate is.
Exactly. So I've got a link to this article in the description below. Definitely check that out. Also, if you're managing your church and using multiple different software and platforms to do everything that you're doing, the most efficient way to do this, and the way to even recession-proof your church in this way, is to do everything on one platform. It's more affordable, and also it's a lot simpler and easier for your church and your leaders to have everything where they can collaborate together. That's why at ChurchTrac, we've made ChurchTrac the church management solution. It's an all-in-one platform that has your people database. It has accounting and worship and volunteer scheduling. You can track your giving and generate your contribution statements with just a click of a mouse. We even give you an app, a smartphone app, and a member portal that you can download at no extra cost for your members. So go ahead and go to ChurchTrac.com and sign up for a free trial today. And let us know in the comments, what are things that your church has done to prepare for the future to help it thrive or save money? Now at ChurchTrac, we're kind of obsessed with saving churches money.
I think it's an understatement.
In fact, we kind of get mad when we see other church software companies take advantage of churches and charge them an arm and a leg just to track their giving or send out texts to their congregation.
Yeah, this is why we've intentionally made our church management software the most affordable in the world. That's no exaggeration, that is the truth. So whether you're a church plant or you're just getting started as a mega church, whatever it may be, go ahead, jump over to ChurchTrac.com. You could probably save your church hundreds, if not thousands of dollars per year. See ya.